was a cop, mom was a teacher, so they were always gone.
He was a cop. Where was he a cop?
Chicago. Whole career. He
in the city.
35 years, retired as a commander.
Yeah.
Yeah, a nice career.
Was he stereotypically tough Chicago cop?
Stereotypically tough, yes. But a little different. He was a very open-minded kind of guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different than all the other cops. Or just,
He's a little more open-minded, but just as tough.
Yeah.
Just as tough.
You grew up on the south side, didn't you?
He grew up on the south side.
Okay.
I was raised on the north side, but I'm a Sox fan because he grew up on the south side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're Tigers fans. Are you Tigers?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
That doesn't make you all bad. And I'd like to take the moment to thank you guys for sending over your entire Lions coaching staff.
That's a little painful, I think. Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how the Bears do because, my first pastoral ministry was in Lake Forest, Illinois.
Oh, all right.
And some of the owners actually came to the church. And so I've been kind of a Bears fan, but never really a Bears fan. So it's been interesting to watch the Bears since about 1988 till the present. And they have their own difficulties in terms of managing, but nothing like the Lions, man.
No, I mean, yeah, the Bears actually won in '85.
Yes.
So that was the last time. Yeah.
We've never even been to the Super Bowl.
Right.
We went back again in 2002, I think it was, against the Colts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then got destroyed. Devin Hester scored in the first 6 seconds, and then it was all downhill.
Yeah.
Quarterback was Palmer. Was he?
It was Grossman.
Oh,
was
right.
Grossman.
Right. Okay. All right.
It was Grossman at the time was the quarterback.
Yeah. Did you grow up here?
I did. Yeah.
You went to Orchardview High School?
Yep. Went to Orchardview my entire high school and elementary.
Okay. Yeah. Is there a Lee Canfield in your family? Okay.
No, not that I'm aware of.
Just trying to remember the Canfields of Orchardview.
There was a Jim and Alice. My brother Brian was a Canfield for a while.
Okay.
He changed it he found his dad from the 50s. So,
Robert, you said you went to Central Michigan?
Yep.
And did you study to get into this field?
No. Well, I went into education originally.
Okay.
So I went to, I was going to be the easier classes. So I was going to do my major was art and my minor was physical education.
Art?
Yes.
Like drawing art?
Drawing,
sculpting?
painting.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my 2D was my concentration.
Oh.
So
still doing some of that?
No.
Not at all?
No,
don't even doodle?
Well, occasional. No,
okay.
So yeah, then I kind of fell into it. Some of my classes with physical education. It's just been, I'm just passionate about it. It just really just clicked.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And so this kind of just asking about your work with Covenant Abilities. So you got involved at an early age in disability.
Yep.
So what was that again? What were the ways that happened for you?
Well, that was starting to work as a volunteer at a place called Shriners Hospital. And
Okay.
they work primarily with children with physical disabilities.
Okay.
And so it was a lot of playing ping pong with guys where I would hit the ball and then go shag it and
Okay.
then bring it back and do that for on repeat for an hour.
Yeah.
But just fun stuff.
Physical disabilities, not developmental disabilities.
There was crossover where they had some individuals that had it, but it was primarily they were in the hospital for some sort of physical disability. But given the crossover at that age that it affects their development, a lot of them are actually developmentally disabled as well.
Yeah. And so then how did it progress into you being the head of Covenant Abilities Network? Like what was it from there? What happened after that?
Well, I continued volunteering at Shriners for quite a few years.
Yeah.
Just kind of loved it. So then when I started my field of study at DePaul, I said, well, let me look at social services. I really love doing this. I love being an advocate, love working with these folks. And during that time when I started studying, I started to get community resources in the greater Chicago area. And as a college student, you can stay up all night. So I started working 1 a.m., 9 a.m. at a part-time shift at a group home. And that's when I just fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it.
During your college years at
Yep.
DePaul. Okay.
Yeah, the Shriners started it. And then I started to kind of formulate what I could do out of a career while I was at DePaul. And then working on that overnight shift kind of just sealed the deal.
And so what were some of did you go right into that work of developmental disabilities, helping people with that?
I did because I started a couple of years before I graduated, actually stayed with that agency And I was, to get through school, I was working the night shift. I was unloading trucks at Sears and going to school. And that first 3 months after I graduated, I quit everything except the part-time job working with folks with disabilities. Figured I'd take a couple months. So I took that summer, just worked part-time. And then I stayed in that agency, applied for a full-time opening, and all she wrote.
Yeah. And same thing for you, Robert? How did it start in college? Or
Yeah, it started probably I was about 20, 21 years old.
Okay.
I was taking the adaptive physical education classes. I had an individual come in. We were going to this pool at the school, and I had to do a lesson plan for the individual, and I was paired up with them for probably about a week or two. Individual got paired up with somebody else a couple weeks later. As we were in the locker room trying to get him changed, he also had a physical disability as well as developmental disability. He was giving the other guys a hard time because him and I already clicked. We were tight, and he looked at me and they asked me if I could help him get in a swimsuit. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I looked at him and I said, "You're giving him a hard time on purpose, aren't you?" He looks at me, kind of grins, and then I was like, from there on, I was the guy. So I kind of fell in love with it from there. And then I worked in Special Olympics as a class as well for physical education. Worked the horseshoes event at state games at Central Michigan.
What is that?
The state games?
No, the horseshoe.
Horseshoes.
You mean like throwing horseshoes?
Yeah, throwing horseshoes. Yeah, you threw horseshoes. It wasn't a back and forth thing. It was just you could just throw down one end and you score.
Oh, I see.
Still, I believe it's still like the 1 point closest to and 3 points for a ringer.
Yeah.
So I got to keep track of that. Go get the horseshoes, bring them back to the next person, and just get able to talk to everybody. And at that same weekend, I was able to Chris Burke, who played in Life Goes On, played Corky. He was the MC for the state games.
Okay.
So I got to, the last night was a dance for Special Olympics state games, and I got to bodyguard for him. So everybody wanted to get up on stage with him because he was up on the stage with a DJ dancing, and I had to kind of stay, like right in front of him so nobody could go in front of him, and because all the girls wanted to go back there and dance with him. So I really fell in love with that, and that's what I want to do for the rest of my career.
Yeah. How long has each of your careers been, year-wise? I mean, this will date you and tell you everybody how old you are, but just curious.
I suppose if you talk about my career post-college, then I'm on about 33 years doing it.
Okay. And a little less than that?
I'm about 25, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great career. So when did you start at Covenant Abilities Network, and how would you describe your job?
Sure. I started about 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago. And it was really coming in and looking at each one of the affiliates. I spent the first year, they didn't have any infrastructure in the Illinois affiliate. They had recently lost their finance department, and they had lost their executive director all within the course of about 4 weeks. So I had to go in, and I actually just ran Illinois as we did an executive director search. I spent about a year acting as their executive director because finding the right person took some time.
Yeah.
Then in the next 2 years, then it was really expanding out to both Minnesota and here in Michigan. And Michigan has been my primary focus over the last year or so.
Yeah. Describe each one of the network affiliates through Illinois, Minnesota, and Michigan.
Sure. Well, each one of them, has their own character, their own flavor.
Yes.
Their own challenges. And I would say in Illinois, their greatest challenge was really getting to a level of stability with their staffing patterns and bringing in the right people to lead the organization and get things organized. In their advancement, I think one of the things they're looking to do is become more progressive. They're currently operating what's known as an ICF or a nursing home. What we'd like to do is they serve 16 people there. We're looking for a way to parlay that into 4 group homes in the community where we have 4 people. Much more natural way of living.
Yeah.
In Minnesota, they're probably our most advanced. The funding levels for Medicaid are excellent out there. We don't know if that'll continue, but that's been great. And we had a long-term executive director out there for about 27 years who was one of the founders. So they actually run in the most stable way in terms of the funding, the consistency of staff. And then in Michigan, what we have here is that we're saying this publicly, so I suppose I shouldn't, but this is my favorite affiliate. It really is. I'm not just saying that because I'm in Michigan. There's just something about the culture here. When Robert first started looking at the homes, one of the things he said is, when I come into these houses, it feels like a home. And there's this wonderful culture, and it's just evident. It's like walking into a big family party, and a family party that's not super dysfunctional, just a happy group, people being together. So really the job that Robert and I have here in this affiliate is making certain we're getting financially stable, that we're helping advocate through the state to get the resources for our folks. And that is a far better thing to do when you're running an organization than try to change the culture.
Yeah.
Because that is very difficult.
Yeah. Changing cultures is very
Yes,
different.
absolutely.
Robert, what's your job title and how would you describe it?
I'm the executive director for Covenant Ability Network of Michigan. To describe it, I just want to provide the best services possible for the individuals that we serve. Provide something that they might not otherwise get anywhere else. With this culture, anything's possible.
Yeah, yeah. You were saying, Dave, that changing culture is hard. Have you ever tried to change a culture?
Oh yeah.
So how do you go about doing that?
That's
and
tough.
I mean, culture of a house or culture of a organization?
In my career, I've been very lucky where I've worked for some really great organizations. So the overall culture in the organization's really positive. Tends to be more the individual programs. So if you have just one house, you have 4 staff, and those can go sideways once in a while in terms of attitude or how people are approaching their job. So it's really going in, spending a lot of time, getting to understand the people we serve, what their needs are, what the challenges are, what is the staff being challenged by, and what are the resources we can bring to bear. And oftentimes it's just spending that time with our residents and with our staff to figure out why are the dynamics the way they are and what sort of additional training can we do. I think at the end of the day, a good deal of what we do is we're teachers and we're trainers, whether we're talking about our residents. And I think from the outside, people look at what we do as you work and train your residents, and that's absolutely true. But we spend far more time training our staff on how to work with folks. And so everything we do is training, whether it's with our staff, with folks in the community, with businesses that serve our folks, with community partners. It's about training people about disability issues and spending the time. And when you train, the paradox is you have to spend just as much time listening as talking. So you change culture by creating those relationships.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to make the hard decision to say, this culture has to change. These are our standards, these are our expectations, and we want you to come along and we'll give you the skills, we'll give you this, but if you don't, we're going to have to part ways.
Yeah. Is it possible for you to tell like a culture changing story of like, this is something that happened that helped to change the culture?
Very early on in my career, I had a home that just kind of wasn't working out. And I was just a kid. I was probably 24 years old. I was newly brought up into management, and I went in, and it wasn't working. The staff just didn't quite understand it. So we did quite a bit of training, but then I sat with the staff and I said, here are the expectations. Here's how we're going to move forward. If you want to stay on board, I want you here. If you don't, I'd appreciate and respect you if you just said, this is not for me. And within 2 days, basically all the staff had to be removed. And I just moved it in the house for about a month. But a little trial by fire.
Yeah.
It was about 4 blocks from my house in Chicago. And I just lived with them for about a month.
Then you started hiring.
Then started hiring. But then you get people who you really mold.
Yeah.
You know, in our field, you both types of staff kind of come in with their own baggage. If you've done this a lot, sometimes you really know what you're doing, but you bring that baggage from a different philosophy.
Yeah.
I love working with folks that are new, and we encourage folks. A lot of times a barrier for coming in to work in this field is, I've never done that before. And for me, that's a positive. It's like tabula rasa. Well, I can mold you. I can tell you about the philosophy. I can get you to grow up within our system.
Yeah.
So we like bringing in fresh people. I love recent college graduates that believe that everything they can do can change the world.
Yeah.
As we get older, we know maybe you can't change the world, but you can change a place. You could change a person. You can make the day better. And that kind of enthusiasm is irreplaceable.
Yeah. Robert, what do you think is the center of your leadership, if that makes sense? Like when you think about leading, this is the thing I want to do to lead well.
I tend to have an open door policy for staff and their staff. So I want them to know that I'm there to support them as much as I am to the individuals that we serve as well. So I'm there for them. I'm there for the staff. I'm there for the culture. I'm there to add to the culture if I need to, and just be supportive in general.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Can you both tell, kind of rewinding the tape a little bit, a story about a resident or somebody within the Covenant Abilities Network that had a profound impact on, why you're in what you've done, either in the Covenant Ability Network or before that? You've told a few, but I'm just wondering if something just really strikes you. And part of that too is just to express to people as they're thinking about maybe doing some work with that. I know you're always in need of volunteers. Like what would speak to people? Like,
yeah, I have one that comes to mind. I had an individual earlier on in my career as well that she was really hard to understand sometimes. And is what I did, I just took the time to listen. You gotta just take the time to listen to people. Sometimes they have a hard time speaking or enunciating or whatever it may be. But I had this individual that would come to me and just ask, how's your kids doing? How's Bobby? How's everything going? How's just asking me these questions. And I took the time to listen, to understand, so I could respond effectively. And I got to the point that I could now listen to her on the phone. So she was able to call me every day just to see how I was doing, see how everything's going, let me know what she was doing that day. Even though she had a difficulty speaking, I was able to take that time and listen to her.
Yeah.
So it really affected the way I take everything else on now and how people communicate.
Yeah, when you say that, I just kind of envision you standing with somebody and it just taking like a long time, like maybe 2 to 3 times longer than it would in a normal conversation. Is that kind of?
Absolutely, and then you have to block out everything, all the other noise. Just focus on what she's saying or whoever's saying it.
Yeah. It's an amazing ability, because I find that people have a hard time, and I do too, of just listening. Right. So, how about you, Dave? Any stories you'd like to share?
Yeah, honestly, for me, it's about looking at people in a different light and seeing the overall capacity that the folks we serve have in the community and with their families. Oftentimes, I think no matter what we do, we pigeonhole people based on our relationship with them or how we interact with them. And I think so often it can be very easy for someone that provides these services to think of our residents as our residents. And we start to think of them as their disability, and we forget about them as people. That can be very easy because you have to deal with the job and making sure that they're running the goals and you're providing those services. But every once in a while you get a glimpse into their life that you're not often privy to, whether it's seeing them with their family, seeing them at their job, seeing them with friends, and being out in the community. You realize there is so much more to this person. And sadly, one of the most profound ways that that's occurred is when we've had people pass. And I always think of our residents, this is Johnny, my resident. And I remember going to a funeral, sadly, fairly recently for one of our folks, and then to see the breadth of their influence on people's lives that I don't think of day to day, because I think of the staff they work with, the day programs they go to, the jobs they volunteer at. And suddenly I'm in a room with people telling this story. And it wasn't Johnny, the person that I provide services, it was my Uncle Johnny.
Yeah.
And this is how Uncle Johnny made me a better person. And this is how Uncle Johnny taught me to be a better person when I was a kid. And this is my brother. And this is my older brother. And there's things that my older brother taught me. And this is my son. And this was my coworker. And a coworker is a very different relationship than a caretaker. And to see that breadth and how much they have to contribute reminds me that these are people and they process differently, but there is so much that we're not privy to, even though we think that we are.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you familiar with Henry Nouwen?
I am, as a matter of fact, yes.
You know, he was a very well-known writer and priest, and then he was making a big impact. I think he was teaching at Yale, and then he just decided that he would put that all aside and go and work at Dayspring in Toronto, which was with mentally and developmentally disabled people. And he worked one-on-one with somebody. This is sort of in the last years of his life. And I wonder if have you read any of that stuff?
I haven't read his writings, but I was introduced to him by someone within the Covenant. Scott Hansen had told me about him.
Oh, you met Henry Nouwen?
No.
Oh.
I was told about him through a gentleman named Scott Hansen in the Covenant, and I did some searches on him and read a bit about his story.
Yeah, as you're talking, I just keep thinking about him because I've read a lot of what he's written.
Okay.
And then there's this development. It's all about the spiritual life, the internal spiritual life. And so then he talks about working with this developmentally disabled person who really couldn't talk or had to be with him 24 hours a day, and the impact it had on him to work with this man. I think his name was Adam. And it's sort of similar. You're talking about slowing down, listening, having time, which is hard for all of us. Anyway, that's just a reflection. You guys are looking at some pretty big challenges, I think, some pretty big opportunities in the next several months, a year. What are some of those things that are going on with you?
I think primarily it's hard to ignore that right now Medicaid is under some threats. We would hope that the funding will not hit the most vulnerable of our population. That's certainly not the intent that we're reading about. That being said, we're talking about very significant cuts. And when it comes from the feds, that's going to go down to the states. And while those may not be intended to affect our population, we'll have to see and advocate with the states to make certain it doesn't. So funding right now, and funding not in terms of thinking of it as just dollars and cents, but thinking of it as resources for the people that we serve. Thinking of it as a way to make certain that we're sustainable in the future, because these are homes, so we want to make certain that we're always there for folks. So the primary thing we're looking at right now is how do we overcome the funding challenges that are going to come at us over the next couple of years, first with Medicaid, and then as we look towards more of a managed care system. Yeah. Those are very significant challenges in our field.
Yeah. Would you add to that at all?
No, I completely agree with that. It's right now, we just got some cuts in Grand Rapids, so we're really kind of focused on trying to get to the bottom and figure out what's going on and reach out to our senators and that sort of thing, just to get some more input from them.
So what's the budget for Joseph Mary and the other two houses, Faith and Hope House in Grand Rapids, the overall budget, and how much of that is Medicare, Medicaid?
About 84% of it all comes through Medicaid funding. Okay. We also receive Social Security to offset the rent from our individuals, but that can vary quite a bit from person to person. The budget, the amount of revenue that we get in from non-donations just exceeds just a little over $1 million.
Okay.
Our costs, though, are closer to $1.2 million.
Okay.
So we have to make up the difference through various fundraising.
Okay. How's that going? How's the fundraising going?
It's going well. A lot of support from the community. We have wonderful partners with 5 Star Real Estate here in Muskegon and Grand Rapids.
Great.
They do a great golf outing for us. We just had it a week ago. They've been doing that for us for years. It's our by far our largest in terms of the amount of money it brings in. We have an annual spring gala. We do year-end appeals, and we have folks in churches that donate to us on the regular.
Yeah. We've had interactions. This is Dave Boggs and Robert Canfield from Covenant Ability Networks. We've had some interactions about leadership, and one of the things that I just keep thinking about is the difference between a situation and a problem. So, and the question I want to ask is kind of when we're thinking about Covenant Ability Networks, what falls in what, but why don't you explain that sort of that idea? I've found it to be very helpful.
Sure. I was watching an interview with a gentleman named Mr. Mariano, and he ran some grocery stores that were very successful in the Chicago area. He was being interviewed, and he was talking about his leadership style, his management style, and how he approaches issues. And one of the things he talked about is when you're in a leadership position, everything is so stressful, you have to differentiate and you have to know where to put your energies. And he said one of the biggest things he thinks about is when a situation comes at him, is it a problem or is it a situation? And for him, the definition of a problem is a problem has a solution. A situation may not have a solution, doesn't mean you don't have to work it, you don't have to deal with it, but it doesn't necessarily have a solution. So sometimes you can mentally let part of that go and let processes play out. If there's a problem, you can identify a solution and work towards that.
Yeah. I would imagine you have problems if you treat a problem as a situation and a situation as a problem.
Absolutely. But I think with our approach to all of this is also looking at things like the current climate and knowing that when there are problems or situations, let's call it situations in this point, they can have problematic results, these situations, but the situation itself might not have a solution.
Yeah.
But within those situations, there are opportunities. Change always has opportunity if you're willing to step outside of the norm and saying, yes, I know this is the way we've always done things, but that's changed now. So we have to let that go now.
Yeah.
Let's now look at this differently, and can we find the opportunities in the change?
So as you're looking at the Medicare, Medicaid thing, is that a situation or a problem? What's problem? How are you guys thinking about addressing that?
I see it as a situation right now that has problematic effects.
Yes.
It's really short term in terms of if we think of it as a problem and a solution, then we do the traditional advocating with our legislators, et cetera, and we need to continue to do that. We've rallied the troops, the families, and they've done advocacy, et cetera. But it's Robert's job and my job to sit back and say, sure, we're going to do these traditional things to address it as a problem, but we have it as a situation. Things are changing. The world is changing. How do we adapt? So Robert immediately came in and said, yes, how do you define Covenant Ability Network? What is our mission? And we very quickly came to the conclusion that it's a facility that's here dedicated to helping individuals with developmental disabilities. It doesn't mean we only have to have one type of model. So immediately we start talking about, okay, what are other services we can provide to individuals with disabilities, be it day program services. Robert came in and said we could do respite services with some of our apartments. There are many ways that we can provide services, so let's be willing to adapt to the changing world.
Well, that sounds like a great way of kind of addressing that. What helped you to see it that way, and what are some of the things that you're thinking about?
Well, as far as respite facility is we have some open apartments in our homes, and respite is a huge need in our area. From what I know of, there's only one or two other places that actually do respite care. So families, caretakers, they need a break. So respite funds are available through the state as well, from what I understand. And then we just line them up and have them come and stay in our apartments. We'll take care of them, include them into with our rest of our residents, and then we're a little bit of extra fund coming into our bottom line there. So that is ideal for future, hopefully.
Yeah.
So,
well, we're really glad that as a church, as Forest Park Covenant Church, we have right in our midst two houses in the Covenant Abilities Network, the Joseph and Mary House, each have 6 residents in them, and we see them on Sundays, we see them throughout the week, and we're very appreciative of having the opportunity to be involved in that. And I don't know if you would have any words of encouragement that you'd like to give to our church, or any thoughts that you'd like to add just kind of at the end here.
I have to say, knowing the guys now over at the homes for the last 3 years, their involvement in this community is probably more precious and important to them than folks here will ever know. The incredible amount of pride that people have for volunteering here, being part of the Bible study, being treated not as someone that receives services, but as an equal, because who wants to be the recipient of charity all the time? Our folks love to volunteer because then they're giving back. And the self-worth and the gratitude that comes from an individual can give back to their community. Forest Park Covenant gives our folks the opportunity to give back in the community, and that is precious. We have a gentleman who's 65 years old that lives with us who has Down syndrome, which is incredibly rare, and he is a big part of this, and he's been coming to this church for years. He's been with Covenant Ability living here for about 20 years. He does a lot of work here on Sundays. He comes in and he works as a host.
Bradley.
Yeah. And he loves it. And he has incredible pride in that. I'm the guy on Sundays.
Yes.
And I see that with all of our folks, having that community where they're not treated as lesser or different, but just part of the community. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I have great love for this place because they provide that for folks.
Yeah, in my short time as well, noticing the involvement and inclusivity that Forest Park involves with the neighbors or the homes. So it's very refreshing, and very thankful on my end.
Yeah. Well, we're thankful.
There's this other thing that a church gives. There's something about the religious background, how people treat individuals, the mission and the ministry behind a church, and being connected to this ministry. We often talk about how we serve individuals with disabilities, but the greatest gift is to the parents. There is little that gives folks more comfort than to know that the group home that their child is involved in is connected to a church that they trust. It opens the doors for those families to trust us a little more when they're making difficult decisions about the future of their child.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's a wonderful thing to have.
Yeah, well, I've been involved in the covenant now since really 2015, and my first calling as a pastor was 2017, so not very long. And you guys have been in the covenant for about a year and a few months, respectively. And so there's kind of this interesting learning curve in any new situation, but one of the things that's been really powerful from the get-go is to see that the covenant really wants to meet people in their physical needs. And they have this old saying, for God's glory and neighbor's good. For God's glory and neighbor's good. It's an old saying. And I remember hearing that for the first time and thinking to myself, wow, I think that's really true in the covenant. And I've found it to be here. I've been here at Forest Park now for a little over 6 years. And immediately you saw that Joseph and Mary House was here, and there's a number of other things that we're engaged in the community in a way that's much more hands-on than any church that I've been in. It's easy to just sort of write a check and send it off, which is a good thing. A lot of what you're doing is asking for people to give to a very worthy cause, and so no apologies for that at all. But it's also really great to have a church that's really hands-on, involved, and it is interesting on Sunday morning because that's one of the main interactions. There's a guy who works as a janitor, and he also sits in the front row. He has for a number of years, and he makes himself very. It's very clear he's there. It's very clear when maybe I need to move on in my sermon, and it's getting a little too long. And that's fine, because it's nothing personal. It's just like he's just expressing in his physical body what everybody else is experiencing only in their mind, and they're not willing to tell me except with their droopy eyes. So we appreciate everything that the Joseph and Mary has for us. So I hope that you guys are enjoying your work.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I do believe that being right here and having the relationship with the Covenant Church does add to the culture that we do have established in our homes.
Yeah. Well, and it's a very interesting experience too as a pastor because, we had a kind of a staff meeting just before this, and you were talking about the political nature of the position of leadership, and I don't know if people realize that, but no matter what leadership position you have, it's a political thing, which is the sort of constituencies that you have, number of constituencies, and trying to make sure that those things that people are in communication first of all, and that when there are competing constituencies, that they understand that not everybody can win if there's a competing issue. Right. So, time is a competing issue. Like if I'm going to give my time, like as you were talking, I thought that was very admirable. If you're going to give your time to speak with somebody and slow down and talk with them, you're going to talk for 5 or 10 minutes with them, that means you're talking to them. You're not talking to other people. And so you'll literally have this feeling on the inside as a leader. I'm talking to these people. Okay, this is taking too long. I need to go over here. And you have to think about what Jesus would do and try to bear down and be God's person and not let those political issues kind of take over for you.
The nice thing is those things take more time, but they're truly the icing on our cake. That's what we get back. We work in a field where the financial rewards aren't great, but the spiritual rewards are fantastic. There's always the work that has to be done, but spending the half hour talking to one of the people we serve, I know it's cliche, but that's where we get back so much more than we give.
Yes.
That's why we do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's why we do it. Well, thanks, guys. We really, really appreciate you, and we're praying for you and for the next year or so as you're working with situations, and so are we. So
we appreciate you guys, and thank you and your
so much.
entire community.
Yeah, you're welcome.